Welcome, everybody. I call to order the Human Services Committee meeting on April 12th at 7 o'clock. We have councilors participating in this meeting tonight, both in chamber and remotely via Teams meeting per the governor's order. All the Human Services Committee members are present in the chamber tonight. I will begin by calling a roll call vote to confirm attendance. Councilor Dumas.
Councilor Dumas is present.
Councilor Irish.
Councilor Irish is present.
And I'm Councilor Wagner and present. In addition, I'd like to recognize the following councilors who are not part of the Human Services Committee but are present with us this evening. Council President Ossing, Councilor Navin, Councilor Perlman, and Councilor Doucette. We have one item on our agenda this evening, order number 21-1-8262, which is a public informational meeting to allow Mass General Brigham leadership to present additional details regarding the proposed Mass General Brigham Hospital expansion. For clarity, I would like to note that we will be also referring to Mass General Brigham as MGB. I'd like to pause for a minute and welcome Councilor Landers. Thank you. The public meeting will begin with the Mass General Brigham's staff presentation and will be followed by questions and comments from the Human Services Committee members, after which non-committee council members will be invited to speak as well. This is a committee meeting and it's not open to public comment. I would like to extend a warm welcome to John Fernandez, President of Mass Eye and Ear, and Christopher Philbin, MGB Vice President, Office of Governmental Affairs. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us this evening and for speaking to us about this important issue. MGB has an excellent reputation for providing outstanding health care. However, many people in our community have expressed concerns regarding the potentially negative impact that this project may have on our vulnerable people in our community and their access to affordable quality health care. We appreciate you taking the time to speak with us this evening, to share information, and to be willing to answer our questions. So I believe Mr. Fernandez will be leading the presentation this evening.
Yes, thank you very much. Shall I begin?
Yes.
Yeah, first of all, big thank you for making the time this evening to hear us, and we're more than happy to answer questions. Chris and I will go over a brief presentation, which we passed out in advance, and we look forward to the conversation tonight. So in the next slide, Steve. So first, this is part of an overall strategy for Mass General Brigham, and our group is called Mass General Brigham Integrated Care, and we formed this initiative to develop care across our region closer to the homes of our patients, and in a big way reimagine the way we deliver ambulatory care across our health system. And then we also wanted to leverage in-person as well as digital services across our system. And at each one of these sites we'll have, and I'll go into more detail on this, we'll have both primary care and, very importantly, behavioral health, specialty care, imaging, and ambulatory surgery. Next slide. So a few key points on this slide. There's been a lot of talk about the price and costs and all that stuff, but let me talk about what's going to happen for us. We will be at 25% less than our normal cost because these will not be hospital-based settings. These are outpatient settings known as clinics. And in addition, we'll also be creating a lot of jobs, both permanent and construction jobs. And you can see about 180-ish permanent jobs and a lot of construction jobs while we build the new site. And we're doing this to meet our patients' needs, and we'll go into that in a little bit, that already choose Mass General Brigham for their care already today. Next slide. So Westboro, there's about 40,000 patients that are already choosing Mass General Brigham for their care. And we selected this market area, which is broader than Westboro, but this is the geographic area that when we studied it had about 40,000 patients within a 20-minute drive time. And the little red dot in the middle is where our site is located, or will be located, excuse me. Next slide. Then just a little bit about these 40,000 patients that already decide to come into town or Newton Wellesley or one of our other sites. So about 56% of them have a PCP in our system, and about 60% of those are in a risk contract, which means we have full financial risk for that patient population. And the other thing, just to know, we already are, those patients make up, you can see down here in the bottom part of the chart, about 150,000 office visits. So the 40,000 number is a head count, not the amount of healthcare services rendered. That's at the bottom of the page. And then you can see the major imaging and the day surgery cases, all that meet the demands that we have projected for the site out here in Westborough. Next slide. I mentioned this a little earlier, but we think it's really important to mention because behavioral health is a huge problem no matter where you live in Massachusetts or even New England, probably the United States. And we are designing our care model for the future to have behavioral health embedded in these sites. It's a absolutely unbelievable problem that we watch every day in healthcare. And we put some estimated numbers down here for this area about how many thousands of patients are in need of behavioral health, and we plan to provide them at these sites and hopefully care for them before they get in too deep a trouble from a chronic or more serious than outpatient care. Next slide. So I want to turn it over to my colleague, Chris Philbin, who's going to go over some of the economics and payer matters that have been brought up at other meetings. Chris?
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thanks. I too want to just express my thanks, as John did, to City Councilor Wagner and the committee members and the other councilors that are participating for giving us this opportunity tonight. You've been very gracious in accommodating this request, and I want to thank the city clerk, Mr. Kerrigan, and the council secretary, Karen Boulay, as well, for their assistance in facilitating this. You know, I know that this chart may be difficult to read a little bit, but essentially we just want to highlight for all of you the point that John just made, which is, you know, we are at financial risk for a large number of our patients in commercial contracts. We've been a pioneer in taking on risk in that area. And this shows you, based on this bar graph, where we stand in comparison to other competitors with respect to the number of at-risk contracts that we've engaged in and have for a long time. So we've been recognized for sort of our pioneering work in this area. And it's another reason why we want to be in a position to better serve our patients and better coordinate their care, since we have a significant financial incentive to do so. Go to the next slide, I guess. John, did you want me to go on from here?
Yes, Chris, just go ahead.
Great.
I'll add commentary.
Okay, wonderful. So, you know, as John just detailed for you all, the clinical and economic benefits of our proposed facility in Westborough. And as I think you know from prior presentations, the state's regulatory review process for reviewing projects such as what we've proposed is called the State's Determination of Need Program. It's been around since the 1970s, I think was when the statute was first passed, and has been amended. And the program's been revised most recently, I think in 2017, by some rulemaking. What is the state's regulatory review process for this and any other sort of similar proposal for a substantial capital expenditure, change in service, original licensure, transfers of ownership, and change in site for healthcare facilities? And as you know, it's governed by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. You know, the purpose of the DON program, as defined by DPH, is to encourage competition with a public health focus, to promote population health, to support the development of innovative health delivery methods and population health strategies within the healthcare delivery system, and to ensure that resources will be made reasonably and equitably available to every person within the Commonwealth at the lowest reasonable aggregate cost. We absolutely are confident that our application meets that purpose and satisfies the 6 factors here, which DPH has promulgated as the criteria for which they evaluate these applications. And I would just call your attention to sort of factor number 1, which emphasizes a point that we've made previously, which, you know, the regulatory review process should be based upon demonstrated a need to serve our existing patient panel, which John just described to you, totals more than 40,000 people within a 20-minute drive time radius of our proposed site in Westboro. So you can see there in factors 1A through C, the emphasis and focus is really on serving the existing patient panel. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anywhere within these 6 factors some of the challenges that other providers have raised to our application with respect to competition. And we don't think, frankly, that's going to be part of the DPH's analysis as we go through this process moving forward. We can move to the next slide. You know, UMass Memorial, I think, has attempted to discredit in their presentation they made to you just a few weeks ago the DON program as, I think, a backdoor way to gain regulatory approval. We don't certainly see it as that. I doubt very much DPH would see it as such. And it's frankly very hard to understand why UMass Memorial would make that allegation, since they right now have a DON application of their own pending to acquire the Harrington healthcare system in southern Worcester County for $143 million maximum expenditure or estimated expenditure, which will only serve to grow their market share in Central Mass. They also just recently had a DON application of their own approved with their joint venture partner, Shields Healthcare, to expand their imaging capacity on Shrewsbury Street in Worcester. So they themselves have two DON applications, one recently approved and one pending. So certainly if it's a fair and legitimate regulatory review process for those 2 transactions, it certainly should be for ours as well. You know, setting all that aside for a moment, we know full well, I'm sorry, could you go back one more slide? I apologize. We know full well that Marlborough Hospital has a very proud history in the city of Marlborough and is a valuable community asset. And as its parent organization, UMass Memorial, has asserted that it's deserving of special protection because it's designated as a high public payer hospital, meaning more than 63% of its gross patient service revenue is derived from public payer sources such as Medicaid, or in Massachusetts, Mass Health and Medicare. And that's a fine argument to make, except that, as you can see from this chart here, Marlborough Hospital is not alone in that special category. There are 38 such designated high public payer hospitals that are geographically dispersed across the Commonwealth. We've highlighted there for you 3 of them. First, you'll see that Marlborough Hospital is near the low end and barely qualifies at 63.6%. UMass Medical Center is slightly higher than that. And then we've highlighted for your benefit North Shore Medical Center, which is one of our community hospitals, part of the Mass General Brigham system located in Salem that serves the greater Salem area, which has roughly 70% of its gross patient service revenue come from public payers. And we're very proud of the fact that, notwithstanding the real financial challenges that come with being so dependent and reliant on public payers, and UMass Memorial would get no argument with us that Medicaid rates are insufficient to fund the cost of care for that population, and Medicare to a lesser extent. But notwithstanding the very real challenges that North Shore Medical Center grapples with, as do all of these hospitals, it managed to open up in 2019, October of 2019, the Epstein Center, which doubled its inpatient psychiatric capacity from 66 beds to 120 beds. It is now the largest inpatient psychiatric unit attached to an acute care hospital in the Commonwealth. It was more than a $200 million investment by our system, and knowing full well we'll never recover that investment, we made the decision to do that anyhow, because it's part of our public mission, frankly. And we know that other healthcare systems, including UMass Memorial, have made other decisions. UMass Memorial not so long ago closed 13 inpatient psychiatric beds, and I believe you were told in their recent presentation that if our Westboro facility is approved, it might jeopardize behavioral health services, inpatient and outpatient, at Marlborough Hospital. So that's just a contrast that we think is frankly worth noting and wanted to bring to your attention. So based on this logic, there's no place, frankly, in the Commonwealth that any provider could go to open up outpatient services like we're proposing in Westboro if you were to infringe upon the primary service area of a high public payer hospital. You can see they're all over the state, east, west, north, and south. These 38 hospitals are geographically dispersed all over. So we just don't feel that that's a protection that UMass Memorial and Marlborough Hospital can fairly make, given that we're all living under a cost growth benchmark and all under enormous pressure to better serve our patients and to reduce the cost of care, which we've done successfully over the last several years with our physician groups living successfully under the cost growth benchmark for all of the three major commercial payers. So wanted to bring that to your attention as well. If you go to the next slide, please, thanks. So I apologize, and this will be the last slide, and we'll then open it up for any of your questions and comments. And I should mention, we're not expecting tonight, even though we think our presentation is probably compelling to change any hearts and minds on the Marlborough City Council, but we just felt in the interest of equal time, we should make this presentation to you. But let me just apologize in advance if we bristle a little bit when some of the suggestions are made that that UMass Memorial is only coming to Westboro because we only care about commercially insured patients. And that's why we've chosen Westboro in that catchment area. I think this is another instance, frankly, where state regulators and elected officials are asking, are being asked to look past the fact that, UMass Memorial Healthcare in a joint venture with Shields Healthcare, which is a family-owned for-profit company, and Reliant Medical Group, which is also a for-profit physician practice owned by Optum, which is the largest for-profit owner of physician practices in the nation, opened a joint venture ambulatory surgery center at 151 Main Street in Shrewsbury. Well, that's the headline that I mentioned there to the right from the Worcester Business Journal. Neither Shields Healthcare, and frankly, neither does Reliant or Optum, share the same obligations we have as UMass Memorial as a charitable organization. That was a decision UMass Memorial made, and it made it round about the same time it also chose not to participate in the Governor Baker's signature initiative to better serve the mass health population in Massachusetts through an accountable care organization program that it rolled out. Only 1 out of 18 health systems in the Commonwealth chose not to participate in that program. And I don't think, frankly, that's something that state regulators have lost sight of either. They've instead made, other business decisions, which we just ask you to consider and juxtapose based on some of what's being alleged of our motivation for pursuing Westboro as this is the site of this ambulatory care clinic that John described. It's interesting, if you look at the census data, and I hope you don't bother to do this, but you're more than welcome to. If you look at the most recent census data, Westboro and Shrewsbury are very similar communities in almost every single regard, with the exception that Shrewsbury is nearly double the size of Westboro. But with respect to race and ethnicity, poverty level, insurance rate, number of insured, median income, the communities are very, very similar. So again, we just want to point out that we shouldn't be held to a different standard than others who are seeking to deny our patients in the Metro West region better access to care at a more affordable cost. We frankly will take a backseat to no one when it comes to our commitment to community health. I think if you spoke with your colleagues in the cities of Chelsea and Revere and Everett, they would tell you that our work in those communities has been nothing short of heroic, even before the COVID-19 pandemic and continuing. There isn't a national award that our healthcare system hasn't received for our work in this area, including in 2015, the very prestigious American Hospital Association Foster McGaugh Prize, which I know UMass Memorial has been a finalist for twice, and I sure hope they win it because they're certainly deserving as well. But we just, as I said, bristle when it's suggested that we're only interested in sort of cherry picking or creaming commercially insured patients, given the prestigious recognition we've received and an acknowledgement for our work in this area. So as I said, just in closing, before we open it up to your questions and comments, we just believe it's patently unfair and not within the bounds of the DON structural regulatory framework to deny our patients in Metro West better access to affordable care based on anti-competitive grounds and specious claims like those that have been made against our facility in Westboro. As I said, UMass Memorial will get no argument with us that Medicaid rates are insufficient and inadequate. We know they have special obligations too, as the clinical system that funds the state's only public medical school. But that's something the state has also recognized over the last several years by allocating more than $200 million or more in Medicaid supplemental funding to the UMass Memorial clinical system to meet those obligations. So with that, again, I thank you for your time and your attention, and John and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that presentation. It pains me that we even have to have this conversation, and we're talking about competition and just the structure of our medical care in this country just, it's the root of the problem, but here we are. So a few questions I'd like to start off with is the facility proposed in Westboro is 62,000 square feet, which is exactly the same size as the one proposed in Woburn. So the one out here, you're saying there's roughly 42,000 patients that'll be served by that 62,000 square foot facility, where Woburn, you hope to serve 102. That to me indicates a plan for tremendous growth. Can you say more about that?
So I'll make a couple comments. One is we've tried to make these facilities much more standard and therefore efficient as we build them in other communities. So the site in Westboro is actually smaller in the sense that we only have one MRI and one CT scanner. Number two is we do expect, and you can look at any data, national, local, the expanding need for outpatient care for a couple reasons. One, the aging population, but two, a lot of inpatient procedures moving to outpatient. For example, hips and knees, presently mostly done in a hospital, are rapidly moving to outpatient, and that's true across various specialties. So we anticipate just with our patient population to have continued growth. And we build these buildings for, we stay in most of our communities for decades, if not hundreds of years. So we try to think ahead when we're building those sites. So Westboro is actually it's the same square footage, but it's different technologies that do take up a fair amount of square feet. So there are differences, slight differences, but we're trying to build them all in the exact same way. We get a lot of efficiencies in terms of equipment we buy, how the money we have to spend designing them, et cetera.
I hear that, thank you, and it seems like it's twice as much building as you need, and I don't see that in any other industry that goes with, well, we'll just build the same thing everywhere, and even if it's twice as much as we need, that is concerning to me. That to me indicates significant growth that's anticipated in your patient, number of patients you're serving. You brought up, here's the thing with the impact. So I get you're an excellent hospital. I have a lot of connection to Chelsea. I know the work that Mass General Brigham does, but it's the impact in this community that's the concern. So we talked about safety net hospitals, in order to survive, need to be financially viable, which we talked about. They have to counter the balance the losses from their safety net care with revenue from commercially insured patients. So what comes to mind is the example of Good Samaritan Hospital in Brockton, which there was a quote, it was 2020, January 2020, Commonwealth Magazine was referring to a study by the Health Policy Commission, and that study noticed that as the increase in outpatient surgeries at MGB, they rose, the inpatient surgery at the community hospital decreased by the same amount. And that's a real concern here. So as this facility goes in and attracts all those commercially, the people with the insurance, and you'll be bringing patients there, that's going to take away from the facilities like Marlborough Hospital here. And then what happens is, what we saw in Brockton was the services cost on average $5,000 more for an inpatient surgical procedure at the community hospital. It costs less than an outpatient procedure at the Mass General Brigham facility. So theoretically, yes, outpatient surgeries cost less than inpatient, but in the evidence of Brockton, it was completely different, and that was based again on that 2020 study by the Health Policy Commission. So that, to me, is a concern too. Can you talk about that when we look at value and what's being provided?
John, I can speak to that if you'd like a little bit, because I am familiar with that study and that article in Commonwealth Magazine. And my memory is, and I could be proven otherwise, that was a comparison to hospital-based services with hospital outpatient departments. So what the Health Policy Commission is referring to there is that a hospital service done under a hospital license on an outpatient basis. As John described to you, all three of the ambulatory clinics we're proposing in Massachusetts, in Westwood, Woburn, and Westboro, will not be under a hospital license. It won't carry those costs with them that are normally associated with something being under a hospital license. So that's my memory of that particular study and that article that was in Commonwealth Magazine, but we could certainly verify that with the Health Policy Commission.
But we,
It,
so correct me though, before you answer that, so correct me, am I wrong that you won't be doing outpatient surgeries?
no, we will.
Oh.
But if you look at in the presentation on the, whatever it was, the third or fourth page, there are already about 4,000 patients already going into Mass General, the Brigham, or one of our facilities, getting outpatient surgery already, not skipping. They're already skipping Marlborough or other places. And if you having run a lot of hospitals in my day, between 700-800 cases per room, up to 1,000, could be 1,400 depending on the type of case. But round numbers, about 1,000 cases per room. And we have 4 rooms, and there are already almost 4,000 cases being already today going to downtown to get their surgeries at hospital rates. And the non-hospital rates are significantly lower. And from a payer point of view, about 25% lower. Each of those payers are, of course, at negotiated rates with all hospitals across the Commonwealth.
So I think, Counselor, part of the confusion comes is that there are certain services that hospitals do off their main campus that are called hospital outpatient departments that are done under the hospital license, but not on the main campus. And so when it's done under a hospital license, that naturally increases costs. So not everything a hospital does, it does on its primary campus. It does hospital licensed services on an outpatient basis in some communities as like a satellite, for example.
All right, I have a few more questions, but I saw Dave, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't, Counselor Dumas or Counselor Irish, do you have questions? Counselor Irish?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, and thank you for the presentation. I did notice it says that you do have sufficient funds available to continue the ongoing capitalized project of this construction. Is this due to heavy investors into the project, or?
No, we finance all of our projects from our what we call our capital framework, from our own cash sources. So there are no other investors besides MGB.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Counselor Doucette?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I do have a couple of questions just to clarify. As far as capital investments, do you folks float any bonds or anything for these, something like this?
We do not float bonds specifically for this purpose, but we, on a other year basis, MGB floats bonds for our system. I think the last one was a couple of years ago. So we do have bonds, but they're for the whole system, not for one specific project.
Understood. So you would have a capital project that would get a bond that would just be the overarching program?
Yeah, so for example, we would go to market and we'd say, here are the 10 projects we're going to have over the next several years. And we would do a bond for all of those projects together. Mm-hmm. And then we would go through the appropriate approval processes to do that.
Okay, so just as far as, so I understand the process here, in this project and the other ones that are being done, you're going through the procedure, it hasn't been certified yet, et cetera. So would you have floated the bonds before or after now?
We floated the bonds for, I'd have to go double check actually, but we floated the bonds for our future capital probably 2 years ago. And as a bonding agency, we're allowed to then move that money around as needed.
Yep.
We also have other cash sources by making money each year, and donations and a whole bunch of other things make up our capital assets.
Okay. Also, on the slide 5, what do we know about our 40,000 plus patients? You talk about office visits, imaging, day surgeries. what is the time frame of those numbers? Are those annual events, overall historical events? Or, you know, you got day surgeries, 3,736. I assume they all didn't happen within one day.
They're all within one fiscal year.
So it's a fiscal
The
year.
40,000 per year, surgeries per year. We went back and looked at all of our data on our existing patients. So those are all in 1 year.
And those are the day surgeries associated with these 40,000 patients?
Yes.
Okay, and those would be day surgeries at any of the facilities that you currently have?
Those would be day surgeries done in this market, done in one of our facilities from this market
Okay,
in 2019.
okay. The other question I have is on slide 7. You have a bar graph without a legend. Shame on you. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, I was looking at the fine print. So the fee for service is effectively paying directly to the, or the patients pay for them directly versus global budget, full and global budget partial. Can you get into the descriptions of what those actually mean?
Yes, so fee for service means in 90+% of the cases, 97% of the cases, fee for service means it was paid for by an insurance company on a non-capitated or global payment basis, non-contracted. So if you have Blue Cross and you're not in a global payment arrangement with us, a fee for service is that payment from the insurance company. That fee for service does not mean you paid cash, except for in a small percentage of our business, which is a couple percentages.
Okay, so effectively the contracted rate.
Yeah.
And the global budget full versus partial, what's the difference between those?
So, Chris, you may know this better than I do, but the global one, full is if we have a full risk for that patient for all their care. The partial is if our contractual arrangement is only for part of it, or has a mixed way of paying part global, part fee for service.
Okay,
That's exactly right. That's just synonymous with the term risk, right? So we're fully at risk where it says global budget,
Yeah.
full, budget partial means we're partially at risk. And then fee for service, obviously, John just explained.
I mean, I understand where your focus is on trying to get the ambulatory care services in place. I think, you know, your emphasis on mental health is applauded, but I've noticed that overall, you know, probably a lot to do with insurance now is it's, you know, a common support in most patient care facilities to have mental health as well. You talked about the Epstein Center, right?
Correct.
What town, what city is that in again?
Salem.
Salem? Okay. Why was it named Epstein Center, if you don't mind me asking?
No, happy to answer it. I can't remember the gentleman's first name, but Mr. Epstein and his family chose to make a sizable gift to the hospital in furtherance of that particular service.
For mental health?
Very commendable. Yeah.
Very commendable, okay. Okay. Do you know how much the donation was, just out of curiosity, or?
Not off the top of my head, I want to say maybe $5 million or more. You know, the total cost of the project exceeded $200 million, but I could certainly get you that number, Counselor.
No, that's fine, okay. Thank you.
Any other counselors that have questions? Counselor Landers? President Ossing?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chris and John, for the presentation. Just a couple comments on two of the slides, just to help me understand some of the numbers a little better, specifically on slide 5. So liking math, that has office visits, 149,000, when I add up all the percentages, it only comes up to 46. So I'm just curious as to what the other 54% of the service mix is. And it's just a curiosity. I mean, did you just list the high volume ones?
Oh, you mean on where it says day surgery, imaging, and office visits?
Yeah, so on slide 5, it says office visits, 149,000, and it says current service mix. It lists primary care, 29, dermatology, 4. I'm not gonna try pronouncing the next one. But
It's
when you
called
add,
otolaryngology.
but when you add all those percentages up, it comes up to 46%. So just my math mind says, what's the other 54% of the office visits? If I'm reading it correctly. If I'm reading it incorrectly, I apologize.
No, we just picked some of the examples that we would have at that site. The other visits would be, neurology, orthopedics, other services. We just picked a few examples.
Okay, because when I go over to the day surgeries on the other side of the page, you know, those ones that you have the current service mix, those list 68%. And, you know,
Yeah.
again, I'm just trying to come up to 100% and just trying to figure out the math, that's all. And I'm
Yeah, we just picked examples under each one because there's a lot of clinical services.
okay, no, that's the answer I'm looking for. That's, okay, I'm fine with that. Then on slide 9,
Yep.
when you talk about the public payer hospitals, why was North Shore Medical Center selected? I apologize if I missed that.
No problem at all. North Shore Medical Center is one of our community hospitals, part of the Mass General Brigham system, and it is essentially the safety net hospital for the North Shore. So it's part of our system located in Salem. And the only reason it's highlighted, Council President, is to contrast sort of it's in the same status or enjoys the same status as Marlborough Hospital and the medical center that UMass has in Worcester.
Okay, are any of the other hospitals that are listed there part of MGH?
No.
And where would MGH be on this list, or they don't fall under that category?
So this high public payer hospital designation is actually a state designation, but under some of the federal rules, believe it or not, Mass General Hospital would qualify based on the percentage of Medicare and Medicaid patients they serve. But those are two separate sort of designations. But Mass General Hospital, for the purposes of this state high public payer hospital, is not.
On the list, okay. Thank you, Madam
Thank you.
Chair. I'm sorry.
And Chris, just to give a perspective, our health system, I believe, Chris, is in the 50% of public payer, meaning Medicare and Medicaid. If I have by give or take, we can get you that number.
No, that's not, again, this is more
We
just,
don't make this list.
no, it's more for my information, but again, only North Shore Hospital on this list is tied to MGH. Is that a correct statement?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Landers?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
First of all, I'm not going to talk too long. It's very hard for me to knock Mass General. I grew up in Watertown. I'm going to celebrate my 80th birthday this year. And I can remember when I could double park on Fruit Street, make a delivery, some shoes for doctors and nurses, and nobody would bother you. You double parked on Fruit Street. I don't even know if Fruit Street still exists. What's that? Oh. So I find it very hard to knock Mass General. I mean, it's an institution that's unbelievable. I remember Arthur Godfrey, you probably don't remember him, but he was on TV back in the 50s and 60s, and he was the best PR you had. He'd come up from wherever he lived, New York or something, and had hip surgery. So what I'm getting at, you know, it's a fantastic institution. I've been there. I've been to a lot of hospitals. I've been to St. Elizabeth's over the years, Leahy Clinic. I remember how that's grown unbelievable. I think I remember when Leahy Clinic was a small clinic on Beacon Street in Boston. then it moved out to Burlington. I'm not sure, you people are a nonprofit, you're acting like a profit. That mailing that you people did to the greater Marlborough area last week, I think it set you back, to be honest with you. I think tonight is good, but I'm not sure if you're giving a message to some of us that, you know, we're country pumpkins out here, and we're not doing a good job. And if we're doing it, we're more expensive than, you know, somewhere else, you know? I think the UMass system's pretty good. I've had surgery at St. Vincent's in Worcester. I've had that, which isn't part, that's a nonprofit. In fact, they're out on strike right now, the nurses. But you got Memorial, that I go up there for a clinic every month. I mean, we do a pretty good job. Daycare, day surgery, I don't care about that so much. I think you people push people out of the hospital too soon, to be honest with you. But I know it's the insurance company and the government that's doing that. I'm not sure why, I can't quite sink in, why you people going for 4 units, you know, spread around greater Boston. And, you know what, I'd like to see you do more in mental health, yeah, because the state has closed all their mental health institutions. But I get the feeling in Boston, and you know, I was down Watertown, my hometown. I was down there Saturday. I spent some time with some of my old neighbors. But I can remember when we wanted to build the UMass Med School, all right? Harvard Med and some of these schools, they fought that like hell. I can remember we started a law school, all right? BU and Harvard Law School fought that like hell. I remember when we wanted to start a vet school, it never would have happened in Grafton, except finally Tufts said, we'll run it. So that's how we ended up with a vet school. The greater Boston area, I'm basically a Bostonian. You know, I moved out of there 60 years ago, but can't go to bed at night without reading the Boston Globe. But that's the feeling I got. You found a market out here, especially Westboro. I'm not as familiar with South Shore, but I went to school in the South Shore. And so I'm not sure what this is all about. You know, we're not doing a good job here. You guys think you can come in and do better, cheaper, all right? If you were a profit organization, I could see what you're doing, but you act like it sometimes, all right? So, Madam Chair, I'm confused by the whole thing. Could they come out here and help us do things better, especially when they're a nonprofit? Yeah, but I don't know, something in the background. You know, a group of you guys sat down around a round table somewhere along the Charles there, and you come up with this idea. 4 separate units spread around greater Boston. And I don't know, I think it's going to affect us out here. Now, I understand, you know, Marlborough for the most part. I know our Chamber of Commerce. You know, we're very pro UMass. We have a good relationship. We have a good relationship with the hospital down the street here. I understand the Westboro Police Selectmen are all over this. They want you guys to come in. It's ironic because, you know, half of Westboro's population work at UMass, so it's hard to figure. So it's kind of, Madam Chair, kind of a confusing situation.
Yeah. I have a few more questions, so maybe that will help flesh that out, but I appreciate your comments and agree. Did you have any a specific question you wanted to ask?
More. I think someone should sit down and say, what's really behind this, and who is going to benefit by it? Oh, that's it, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I had a few more questions. Did you want, I don't know if you have a
Just a quick-
response to that.
Just a quick one. that we sat down and tried to figure out how we could better serve our patients. Because speaking of Fruit Street, you can't find a parking. It does still exist. You cannot get a parking. It costs a lot of money for patients to park downtown, and it's a pretty long drive. And we looked at the future of healthcare of being more and more outpatient based, and how can we service our patients better so they do not have to drive into town. And that's how we pick these locations. And UMass is terrific. The other hospitals are out there terrific. We're not building a hospital. We're building an outpatient center so our patients don't have to drive all the way into town for routine care like that you would get at this facility. So that's why we did it. There's no double secret plan. It's simply how to service our patients.
Could I add just one thing briefly too, Madam Chair, in response to the councilor's question with respect to the mailings? So you'll see there under that slide number 8, the 6 factors for consideration under the DON process. Factor 1E is evidence of sound community engagement. Believe it or not, DPH requires that we broadly inform the public as to the application. We held, I think, at least 2, John, you were at both of them, I think, community engagement meetings prior to the pandemic when we had first hoped to file and move this initiative forward. But I think if you ask DPH, they would tell you that those mailings are welcome. Anything we can do to call greater attention to the public regulatory review process from this is to the benefit of everyone. So that mailing was done in furtherance of what we're required to do for community engagement.
Thank you. I'll get you to go back to a second, but I'd like to bring up, at one point you mentioned you didn't know why this project was, because it picks up on what Council Landers was saying, why you thought this was, we were confused why this was referred to as a backdoor project at one point. It's my understanding that the Attorney General has actually stopped Mass General MGB from buying any more hospitals due to market dominance. So I think that's my understanding of where that thought comes in. So you can't come in and buy hospitals and expand anymore per the Attorney General due to market dominance. So now you're going to go in and open these clinics. And I totally get, I think you take excellent care of your patients. The problem is how it impacts the community. And nothing in I'm hearing, I hear, how you're taking care of your patients and Fruit Street, there's no park. I get all that. But it's what's the destruction that's left in the wake? And I think about this as an invasive species. Could be food for somebody, an animal, it could be a home, but it sucks all the nutrients from the soil and all the surrounding land around it. So it has a right to live, but it does so at a great cost to everything else in its wake. And that's really the concern that keeps coming to mind here. So I get too that you've reached out and got some information. There was, I'm trying to still figure out this service gap that MGB thinks it's going to fill. So I have information about the survey that I believe you had to conduct a community health needs assessment survey as part of the DPH process. And in that survey itself, number 2 was one of the questions was, what's the strength in the community? Number 2 was access to medical services. And already in this area, there's already 13 facilities within 10 minutes of the proposed location as far as primary and specialty care in the Westboro area. 47 facilities are within 20 minutes. There's 45 clinics, a hospital, 120 physicians. So there are a lot of services out here. The only thing I'm hearing from your presentation, and there really isn't anything different, and I'm welcome to get more questions from my counselors here, is this is good for your patients. But nowhere in this equation is I'm hearing about concern or understanding for the impact it'll have on the community. You brought up mental health. So if this sucks those services away and really upsets that delicate balance to keep a safety net hospital going like Marlborough Hospital, the fear is what'll happen. Behavioral mental health will be cut. Where are those people going to go? They can't get on a bus and go to Westboro. So I'm really kind of feeling frustrated by, yes, this will be a great facility for everyone who can get there and afford it and access those services, but everyone else that has this delicate system that they're depending on right now, they're going to lose it, and that's just, I guess, part of the equation. Help me understand how you take that into consideration when you're thinking about this project.
So I guess I can't answer some of those directly, but I'll answer this one directly. That when we've gone into different communities, we've been a very good citizen in those communities. When you look at the different centers, some of which are hospital-based, some of which are physician-based, but these projects were designed to take care of patients that are already leaving the communities that we outlined in this presentation. They aren't going to Marlborough Hospital. They aren't going to UMass. They are choosing to go elsewhere, and we're trying to figure out a way to better serve those patients closer to their home or even in their home if we can use technology in that regard. It is not designed to crush Marlborough Hospital or anybody else. Healthcare is a very complex system. And I would also just to note, the Attorney General has not said, no, we can't do mergers. We can if we want to try. What you're referring to is the South Shore Hospital one, putting South Shore Hospital into our system. The Attorney General did negotiate and have that project. We eventually pulled that project along with the Hallmark system. So it's not that we can't, it's just the regulatory environment is such that it's a lot harder than it used to be. And there's still hospital mergers going on across this state and across this country in a big way.
Yeah, if I
including
could
with
just
UMass.
I'm sorry, John, if I could just expand on that. Yeah, I think that's frankly an unfair comparison. You know, the front door, back door analogy that was used by UMass Memorial. They're comparing, you know, our DON application for this Westboro facility to our prior attempt to acquire South Shore Hospital, which, by the way, South Shore Hospital asked us to come in and but based on whatever antitrust analysis that the Attorney General did in that particular market at that time, she wasn't comfortable with that. But John's exactly right. I mean, UMass Memorial right now is in the process of acquiring Harrington Healthcare System in Southbridge and Webster, which will further enhance their market dominance in Central Mass and Worcester County. So those things are happening, but I think the back door, front door comparison is in reference to our prior attempt to acquire South Shore Hospital and somehow making that analogous to this DON application in Westboro for an outpatient facility, which is obviously not a hospital.
And one last point I'd make is that the criteria for mergers and acquisitions in this state and compared to the DON process are two very different sets of bars to jump over. One is designation of need, and the other one requires a lot of a legal analysis, both state and federal. Where the DON process is, as Chris mentioned earlier, is on that slide, which is more of a check and balance type of system as opposed to a legal regulatory one.
Can you clarify for me, you've made the point several times that you're going to be serving existing patients. So it's my understanding, though, that your doors will be open, so anyone who's not an existing patient could use this facility, right? Which would make me, again, go back to you're building a facility twice as big as you need. So
Yeah,
we'll be taking new patients, no?
Yep, our facilities are open to every economic status, race, gender. Anybody's welcome in any of our facilities. So yes, those doors will be open to anybody that chooses. But that's true of every facility.
Right. But that's my point, though, and they're gonna be coming from this area, so they'll be, if they go to your new facility, they will be leaving the existing services, which is the reason for this whole conversation and the concern.
That may or may not happen. It's the market for this. If you look at the state and national data on this, you're going to see multiple percentage growth in ambulatory services across the United States, across Massachusetts. So the notion that somehow just because we open this, they're gonna leave Marlborough Hospital. It's just not that. It's not a one-to-one relationship because the market is changing. It's also aging. So I just don't think that's. I can remember a little story I'll tell you from 1995. There was a prediction that there'd be 500 less hospital beds in Massachusetts. Small little problem was they forgot to think about the aging population, and yes, a few hospitals have closed, but that was very few. And the growth in inpatients has been growing ever since. So I think we ought to take into consideration that factor as well.
Counselor
So
Doucette,
it's not
did
a
you have-
zero-sum game that we open
Oh.
a facility and they automatically move. These are patients that have already moved on an annual basis to much more expensive facilities and not very convenient for patients, and not designed for easy patient access. And that's what these facilities will be.
Thank you. I think of the convenience of the people that won't have anywhere to go to, so that's, again, part of the equation. I'm sorry, Counselor Oram, I didn't see that you had joined us, and I see your hands up. Did you have a question?
Yeah, well, and thank you, and I am having trouble with the internet connection. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, because it's breaking up. If I somehow lose you, I'll be back, I promise. Thank you for the presentation, and to start off with, I've been very grateful for having Marlborough Hospital in our community, but also very grateful to have Mass General and Brigham and Women's back in the day when I went to be right down the street, and I can truly understand the demographics of what's happening. I think Marlborough will be the next state capital because I think everyone's gravitating towards us. So I can see why the hospitals want to come our way too. It's obvious right now with the pandemic that people are moving towards Metro West, and we are going to be the metro center, I think, of New England, maybe in 40 to 50 years. But with that said, my concerns would be, first and foremost, I'm glad I heard anyone can go in your doors no matter what their economic background is, what their financial background is, because that would concern me because Marlborough Hospital is taking up pretty much that group of people that, the public payers, which is...
Oops, broke up a little.
When I go to slide 8, if I it's evident throughout the development, can you
Counselor Oram, you're breaking up. It might help if you shut your video off, so we'll just be able to hear your question. I think it's a bandwidth
No,
problem.
you don't need to see me. Okay, so on 1E, it talks about community engagement in slide number 8. Can you explain that a little more, what your community engagement is going to be for the city of Marlborough?
Slide 8.
It's under DON's
yeah.
slide 8.
Yes, Chris, feel free to chime in here. A couple of things. One is that in all the communities we serve, we do outreach and screenings. In addition, and I do not have the exact amount, the monies get distributed more by the state than by us, but there's about $7 million that for the 3 sites in Massachusetts, Woburn, Westboro, that all go, and Westwood, that will be distributed by the state for community health engagement. But in addition to that, we do screenings and all kinds of stuff. And you can see that if you go to any community where we have a outpatient facility, we are active members of the chain, from business to healthcare screenings to schools. You can go to pick a town, you can go to Westboro, you can go to Foxborough, you can go to Salem. We're very active members of our communities that we are providing service. Chris, I don't know if you had anything to...
Yeah, Counselor, you're absolutely right that under the 6 factors considered by DPH for the DON process, one of them is community engagement, which requires you, frankly, do more than just publish, a legal notice and hope people read about it and show up. We hosted a couple of community forums pre-pandemic on this proposal, and then when we had to postpone filing the project, then we had to re-engage with that, and that's part of what those mailings are that I mentioned in reference to Counselor Lander's question. But we'll go anywhere, talk to anyone about the merits of this project. Whatever, whether it's a business advocacy organization, or whether it's the Marlborough Chamber, Marlborough Economic Development Corporation, Rotary Club, you name it, and we'll show up and talk about the merits of this particular facility we're proposing in Westboro. That's something that DPH actively encourages us to do, and I think, frankly, in this instance, the level of community engagement we've done, I think, is probably unprecedented compared to prior DON applications.
Okay, thank you both. And now on slide number 5, you mentioned, maybe it was a different slide. It was the one that mentions the jobs that are being created through this process. I believe I read that in one of these slides.
Yep.
182, maybe. So how does that relate to the city itself? I know I'm being more concerned for Marlborough than the region, but obviously that's why you're here at the city council. How are you planning to hire? Do you have an existing group you're going to bring in from Boston? Just curious how that's going to happen.
No, we'll be hiring from, we'll hire people, we'll hire from anywhere, but we try to hire from the local communities, whether that's, we do not have a group we're moving out to Boston. We are hiring from within that community, but obviously we're open to anybody that applies and is qualified. We would take those applications and then pick the people we need, whether they're nurses, medical assistants, you name it. We will have a process. We do not have a predetermined group of people. So it's big work for us to hire all those people. So we will have job fairs, through social media, every mechanism known to man. And Marlborough obviously will be one of the places we'll try to attract employees from, because it's close, and we hope that works well too, because people would probably prefer not to drive to Boston and stay in their local community.
I could just add a little bit to that, John. May come as a surprise to some of you, though I think I may have referenced it in the letter I sent to council in March. In addition to having nearly 4,000 patients among that 40,000 that John referenced, who are Marlborough residents today, we also have nearly 140 employees who are residents of the city of Marlborough already, who are traveling to one of our other sites, presumably, although in the pandemic they may mostly be working remote. We don't know if they're administrative functions or clinical positions, but we already have 138 employees, I think, that work for Mass General Brigham from the city of Marlborough. It'd be nice to grow that number.
Well, and I can appreciate that. When I was at Brigham and Women's, some of the nurses were coming out of the Metro West area. And at the same time, I can appreciate and really have been very grateful to have a local hospital. And so I understand both sides. What I would like to see, and I think Council Wagner mentioned it, is that some of this competition go away so that Framingham Union doesn't fight for the patients of Marlborough Hospital. Brigham and Women, Mass General Brigham's doesn't fight for the patients of what I'm hoping for is the best for the patients of Marlborough. So it's not as that we're trying to put someone out of business, that hopefully down the road, and I know the state's working at it, is the DON part of it will be for the benefit of the patient, and that we hopefully can keep our hospital within our city. Those are my two concerns. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Orm. Councilor Doucette, did you have another question?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I like what Councilor Orm was talking about, but what really gets me with this is, there are 3 hospitals within the communities that you identified. There's a hospital in Framingham, Marlborough, and Milford. And what we've been talking about, at least at this end, is how do we do less competition and try to have more cooperation for healthcare? You guys are going to be building a state-of-the-art facility. Sure, it's going to probably be very cost-effective. It's definitely more cost-effective than the cost of something like this in Boston. I'm not going to argue that. But, a real ROI, is going to be needed for any investment you guys make into these facilities. On the other hand, if you could develop partnerships with local hospitals so that they don't have to travel that far and they work with existing facilities, it would overall, reduce the cost, because then you didn't have to build these facilities. So this is about a collaboration or cooperation, instead of you guys basically coming in and saying, oh, we'll do it our way, your way, And I think that's the concern that I really have with this. Because there's ample opportunities for your organization to work with the medical infrastructure that is already in place, instead of attempting to replace it. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councilor
Thank you.
Doucette. Are there any further questions? Thank you. I think it's important to make the one last point. We're not Boston, so when we talk about your doors are open to everyone, out in this part of the state, there's no public transportation. So if the services if people can have all they can do to get to Marlborough and those services are cut because a new facility went in close by, they can't get there. There's no way to get there. So the people in the most need, they don't have cars, there's no public transportation. And I think that's an important point to remember. You'll be able to serve only the people that can get there. But I do appreciate your time, and again, I respect the hospital, I respect the care of all of our medical providers and what hospitals do, and particularly, we've appreciated everybody in the health field over this duration of the pandemic and what we're still suffering through. And it really comes down to, like I said at the beginning, it breaks my heart that we're even having this conversation, and we should be able to see collaboration and cooperation, like Councilor Doucette said, and at minimal cost and maximum care and maximum access, and we find ourselves in these situations over and over again. So, just want to make the point that we are concerned about the impact of the most vulnerable in our communities, and this isn't anything against Marlborough Hospital. It has to do with equity and access to care. So I really appreciate your time coming here tonight to be able to give us some more information. You offered some facts and information that we didn't have. We will continue to look into this, and we do appreciate your time. So at this, unless do you have any last comments before I wrap us up?
I'll just make one last comment. I want to thank all of you for taking the time on an evening, even though it's on a Teams, and for your public service. I'm the son of a former city councilor, happens to be in another state, little town called Philadelphia. And I really do appreciate you all taking the time to be public servants. So thank you for this evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fernandez and Mr. Philbin, again for being here and for all your thoughtful comments. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion to accept and place on file tonight's presentation.
Motion to accept and place on file tonight's.
Motion has been made and seconded. Thank you. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. We're in the, just a note for anybody watching, because the full council is present, we do not have to do a roll call vote. So at this time, I will also entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor? We are adjourned at 8:07. Thank you.